Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Washington-Wise is an original podcast from Charles Schwab that unpacks the stories making news in Washington right now and how they may affect your finances and portfolio. Listen at schwab.com/WashingtonWise.
If fashion is your thing, eBay is it. eBay's where I find all my favorites, from handbags to iconic streetwear, all authenticated. For real. This time, a little Supreme, some Gucci. I even have that vintage Prada on my watch list. That's why eBay's my go-to for all my go-tos. Yeah, eBay. The place for new, pre-loved, vintage, and rare fashion. eBay. Things people love.
Quick heads up here at the top. There is some frank conversation about body parts in this episode. Okay, buckle in. Okay, Michael, last night I tried to stream Emilia Pérez. I just got to ask, what did I just watch?
Oh, I can't answer that question.
Michael Schulman writes about Hollywood over at The New Yorker. I called him up because I wanted to escape from the news and talk about what's become, to me, the most baffling film of awards season.
When I saw that movie last fall, I was just kind of stumped by it. I was like, this is such a strange mishmash of different elements, you know, Mexican drug cartel, a trans narrative, a musical. I was just sort of baffled. What am I supposed to feel? Is this good? Is this terrible?
It's hard to sum up the plot of this movie in just a few words, but I will try. Emilia Pérez is an absurdist musical about a Mexican cartel boss who's trans. And after getting surgery to physically present as a woman, she reconnects with her family and opens a nonprofit to help victims of gang violence. There's a love story, there's a twist ending, but you might not get that far. If you remember any scene at all, it's probably going to be one that is just a half an hour in. The cartel boss's lawyer, played by Zoe Saldana, is visiting a surgeon, and I'll let her take it from there.
Hello, very nice to meet you. I'd like to know about sex change operation.
I see. Men to woman, or woman to men.
Man to woman.
From penis to vagina. Is it for you?
Woman to man, man to woman, penis to vagina. That one?
Yes! What?
Oh, it's the hit of the season. You don't love that song?
Surgeries are offered up and Zoe Saldana's just like, yes, yes, yes. And I'm like, this is not a good song. This is not good.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when that first started circulating online to show how batshit this movie was. People who defended it were saying, well, you know, this is really taken out of context. It's supposed to be kind of heightened and absurd. And yeah, there are other parts of the movie that are more measured and less ridiculous than that. I do feel, though, that I don't know if that scene is defensible. It's offensive to, like, taste.
Yes.
It's very jarring. And as someone who loves musicals, I feel like this is what people who hate musicals think musicals are. People just singing, like, ridiculous things like penis to vagina in this kind of, you know, barely tonal warble that makes no sense. And you just like, why would anyone open their mouths and sing that?
Yeah, whatever I just watched, I didn't think it was the best movie of the year. But how many Oscars is this thing up for?
13, which is nearly the record. I do think musicals have an edge with, like, number of nominations. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the front runner in the race.
Right. But other movies that have gotten 13 nominations, we're talking Gone with the Wind, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Chicago.
Okay, look, Gone with the Wind has some problems, too.
It's true. It's true. It's true. But I would put them in a film canon.
There's something really weird about the fact that Emilia Pérez was anointed in this way by the Oscars because it's such a polarizing movie. It's such a baffling movie. I don't know. Maybe it could win Best Picture. That would surprise me at this point. But I do think that there's a little bit of a maybe a little bit of, if not buyer's remorse, then kind of questioning this, you know, why this movie?
Today on the show, the strange journey of Emilia Pérez, an awards show darling that's got people scratching their heads. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This episode is brought to you by Discover. Have you heard about doublenomics? It's okay if you haven't. It is extremely niche and practiced by Discover. Here's an example of doublenomics. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back into $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
Planned Parenthood Federation of America exists so that all people can get access to the sexual and reproductive care and education they need to make informed decisions about their health. More than 2 million patients a year rely on the services Planned Parenthood health centers provide, like STI testing and treatment, birth control, gender-affirming care, abortion, cancer screenings, and so much more. Right now, all across the country, reproductive health care and rights are under attack from public officials who are out of step with the will of the vast majority of Americans. The constitutional right to abortion, control of our bodies, and the health care we need has been stolen from us. And now politicians in 47 states, yes, 47, have introduced bills that would block people from getting the sexual and reproductive care they need. Planned Parenthood knows that equitable access to health care, including safe, legal abortion, is a human right. Right now, Planned Parenthood needs your help to protect access to health care. Donate today by visiting plannedparenthood.org/protect.
Can you give like a SparkNotes style summary of the movie for those who haven't seen it?
Oh my God. Can I say what happens in Emilia Pérez? Oh my goodness. Okay. So Zoe Saldana is a lawyer in Mexico City who is, for reasons I'm still a little unclear about, drafted by a leader of a drug cartel to help arrange her gender transition.
Yeah, motivations are very unclear here.
Yeah. And then that happens. And then years later, the former drug cartel leader, who's now living as a woman, reconnects with Zoe Saldana's character and re-enters the life of her ex-wife, played by Selena Gomez, who does not know that this woman was the person she was married to. And then together, the former drug cartel leader and the lawyer open like an NGO to like help victims of that disappeared from drug crimes.
It's like a redemption story, sort of.
Yeah. She's trying to redeem herself by helping the people she formerly, had murdered.
And then all along the way, there are these musical numbers, which are a lot of spoken word and like kind of out of nowhere. But they are bold. I'll give it that.
Yes. I'm still kind of wondering why it's a musical. I don't really know. It would have been a lot even without the songs to sort of digest. That's why I say I was so stumped when I saw it. I was like, what even is this? Which I think is like maybe a cool quality.
Yeah.
I like movies that you can't immediately categorize. And I feel like I should rewatch it, although I don't particularly want to.
So how did Emilia Pérez get made? Who's behind it?
Well, Jacques Audiard is a quite well-known veteran filmmaker in France.
I'm surprised France, because this movie is set in Mexico.
Okay, well, see, that's one of the critiques people have had of it, that the director is a Frenchman. Very few Mexican people were actually involved. The stars include Carlos Sylvia Gascon, who is Spanish, Selena Gomez, who's American and apparently does a very bad Spanish accent.
She had to learn Spanish for this movie.
Yeah, and I'm not a Spanish speaker by any means, but there's been quite a lot of critique of how she pulls it off or doesn't. One of the critiques that in Mexican audiences have had of this movie is that it has this sort of view of Mexico that really is just focused on like drug cartels and violence, and it's an outsider's view of Mexico that Mexico seems to feel is very retrograde and stereotyped. And there are also really not a lot of trans people involved. One of the things that's been so striking about Carlos Sofia Gascon becoming the face of the movie and then sort of becoming the liability of the movie is that you realize that it's a whole movie about a trans woman, and there was really just basically one trans woman involved in it, and so it's really strange. It's like an outsider's perspective in two different ways.
Like, one point I've seen made again and again is like there actually is an interesting movie to be done about all the things this movie is about. But this movie isn't that, because it's quite earnest actually in a lot of ways. Whereas there's a lot of humor in the idea that a drug cartel leader would turn themselves around and found a nonprofit and, and try to get publicity for people who had been murdered by the drug violence that this person inflicted. Like there's a dark humor there that the film doesn't fully explore.
Right. And I think part of it is the tone, which is very hard to pin down, but it's sort of this absurdist tone that's, a bit comic, but also kind of surreal and strange. And then, trans viewers have said things like, well, one criticism I've seen is that it sort of returns to these tropes of, the sort of trans murderer or trans, psychopath. Like that's been a trope in movies going back to like The Silence of the Lambs. It hasn't quite satisfied any of the people that it's supposedly representing, which is a problem for a movie that is in its Oscar campaign casting itself as a triumph of representation.
Yeah. Describe how all these criticisms like collided with awards season, because this movie was also up for a bunch of Golden Globes, right? Like it's been out there.
Yeah, no, it won quite a lot of Golden Globes, and when it won Best Musical or Comedy, I remember at the Globes, the end of the Globes was that they let Carlos Sofia Gascon, who plays Emilia Pérez, give a speech at the end. It was about transgender visibility.
You can maybe put us in jail. You can beat us up, but you never can take away our soul, our existence, our identity. And I want to say to you...
And of course, on the eve of, Trump's inauguration, that was a very powerful message. And for a movie that's so confusing tonally, that's a sort of classic Oscar campaign move, to sort of have someone out front to represent the movie in some clear sort of, progressive way, saying like this, this is my truth, and you're like voting for this movie is sort of a political statement. It's a statement of acceptance.
So what were you expecting when the Oscar nominations came out?
Well, I think it had a lot of momentum. I mean, I was just observing the sort of arc of the campaign, which is its own thing, separate from the movie. There's a whole awards department at Netflix whose job is to sort of position these movies and make sure they win. They have not been successful so far because Netflix has never won Best Picture, and it was, it seemed like this could be the year that Netflix finally got the top prize, because it had this contender that had sort of ended the Globes on this note of triumph and had this kind of team mascot in Carlos Sofia Gascon who could make voters feel good about voting for this movie, especially given the political backdrop. So that was sort of that's like the scene setting for, the campaign then kind of falling apart.
So the Oscar nominations come out. I still remember on that day logging onto the Drudge Report, and like it was the top of the Drudge Report. A big picture of Carlos Sofia Gascon, like said something like trans takeover. Like it was really this. It felt like a moment, right? Did it feel like that in Hollywood?
Well, it did. I mean, for one thing, it was Gascon is the first openly transgender actor to be nominated at the Oscars. So that's something worth noting. I mean, that's the Oscars have these firsts. It always feels a little bit, too late, but it also is something to take note of. So yeah, that was part of the narrative, that it was history making.
How quickly did things come crashing down?
Very quickly. Very quickly. I guess the first thing I remember noticing is that Gascon had made these remarks to a Brazilian newspaper about one of her competitors in Best Actress, the Brazilian actress Fernanda Torres, who stars in I'm Still Here, which is also nominated for Best Picture. And let me tell you, Brazil is very engaged in this year's Oscar race. There's a big Brazilian audience. They are very online. Then Gascon gave an interview with a Brazilian paper where she said something like, I've never said anything bad about Fernanda Torres, but the people who work with her are attacking me. And that's a very unusual thing for an Oscar nominee to say, because Oscar campaigning is very, on the surface, very positive. Like it's not like political campaigning where there's, attack ads. If there's negative campaigning, it's really in whispers. It's really not supposed to be traced to anyone. Like going back to the heyday of Harvey Weinstein in the 90s, he would get on the phone with journalists and say, like, don't you think Saving Private Ryan is kind of overrated? It's just only the first 25 minutes are really any good. And then that would sort of, he would try to start these whisper campaigns. That's usually how it works. So it was unusual for her to be, calling out the fan online community, the Torres hive.
I bet the fans loved that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, I believe that any very visible trans woman faces a lot of hate on the internet. So fine. I was kind of like, that's, I'm sure that she sees a lot of that day to day. So it seemed like just little things were, there was like these sort of little tensions, which always happen in Oscar season. I mean, there's always some thing from someone's past or a slight, a misstatement or bad joke that someone makes.
But can I just say, it seems like this is an especially messy season.
Then it became one. I mean, it just, that's what I was thinking. It seemed like sort of normal stuff that happens. And then what I have noticed is more than past years, it feels like every single movie has had something to deal with. For instance, The Brutalist had this sort of mini uproar when its editor revealed that they used AI for a couple things. And then Carlos Sofia Gascon kind of became, what Twitter used to call the main character, where she kind of sucked up all the oxygen.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs, like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
It seemed like there was this break in the blowback to Emilia Pérez, and then it revved up again. Can you explain how?
It's funny. Things were so happening so fast. I don't really know. I mean, I was actually on a phone call giving an interview to a Brazilian newspaper about this tension with Gascon and Torres. And then when I hung up, I saw that Gascon's tweets had been discovered, and it was a whole different ballgame. And I had to race back to the Brazilian reporter and say, I probably, defended her a bit. And now I have to add that this is completely inexcusable.
Tell me a little bit about Carlos Sofia Gascon's tweets.
No, yeah. She loved to tweet. The woman loved to tweet. And look, she
was tweeting through it.
She was tweeting through everything. I mean,
I love that you wrote in your piece that Carlos Sofia Gascon's tweets resurfaced the word every public figure dreads.
Yeah, I mean, if you hear that something of yours is resurfacing, then, start drafting the apology.
Best of luck to you.
Yeah. Okay, so some highlights from her tweets. When George Floyd was killed, she called him a drug addict swindler. The year of the 2021 Oscars, she said it reminded her of a Black Lives Matter demonstration.
Oof.
She wrote a lot about Muslims. She said, is it my impression, or are there more Muslims in Spain? And then she said, next year, instead of English, we'll have to teach Arabic. And these are all translated from Spanish. And she has claimed that some of them are, they were sort of humorous or tongue-in-cheek at the time. There was one particular about Hitler that seems to have been kind of lost in translation. I'm just not going to even touch that one. But there were enough of them that people were like, oh, wait a second, who is this woman? And one of my initial thoughts was, hasn't the very well-funded Netflix award team had many months to just check out this woman's social media and like figure out what she has said?
Yeah, I thought this was such a good observation. Like, there are people whose whole job it is, you would hope, to make this film as palatable as possible. And part of that is making your stars as palatable as possible.
Yeah, and if you have sort of your best chance at a Best Picture win for Netflix since they started gunning for Oscars, and the Best Picture nominee is someone who's not very known or, vetted, as they would say in politics, you should probably check out what is on their live Twitter account from the past couple of years. So anyway, she deleted her account on X, and then she started releasing apologies, and they were very kind of rambling, very emotional apologies that had a lot of defensiveness to them as well. She was saying there was a plan to sully her existence with lies or things taken out of context. So she wasn't really sort of just releasing a straightforward apology. She kept saying how she wasn't, she's not racist. She doesn't have a racist, thought in her mind, and how she's always stood up for marginalized people. But these are tweets that you can read, and they're pretty clear what she was saying, and they sort of. It wasn't just even one group. It was kind of this smear of offensiveness to so many people.
How did Netflix respond? Like, is she even going to go to the Oscars?
That's a huge question that I have, because one of the things that's been reported recently is that Netflix is no longer paying for her to come to the Oscars. And they've basically iced her out of the entire campaign. Meanwhile, every other major figure involved in the movie has had to distance themselves, like Zoe Saldana and the director Jacques Audiard. And the question is sort of, how has it truly knocked it off the frontrunner status for Best Picture? And if so, what is running up just behind it?
It seems to me like this movie and the awards show reaction to it embodies this problem that I think, I don't know, a lot of people in charge have, which is valuing representation for representation's sake. Like, everywhere this film went wrong, it seemed to be a problem of tokenism, not thinking deeply enough. Like, Mexican people didn't feel valued by this film about Mexico. Trans people didn't feel valued in this film about a trans person. And the film itself didn't do much to humanize any of these people. Like, they're essentially cardboard cutouts, which you could say is a problem of musicals maybe more generally, that they are kind of like shticky, but I think is a particular problem of this film. And I just wonder if you'd agree with that take.
I mean, not to be a downer, but I do think it's sort of sad that this breakthrough nomination came through someone who has been so problematic, not just for her movie and the Oscar campaign around it, but is just not someone who a trans audience can be proud of. And I think about last year when Lily Gladstone was nominated for Best Actress for Killers of the Flower Moon. And, she was, I think, the first Native American from the U.S. to be nominated. And, I remember when I interviewed her, she used her platform in such an elevated, thoughtful way. She knew that this spotlight was on her, and she was going to use it. She was going to use it to throw focus on her community, throw focus on the Osage who helped, who were part of the making of the movie. And, I don't envy anyone who has to bear that sort of burden of being the first, to be something where you represent a community. You have to really, stay on message, and there's just a lot of attention paid to it. And I don't know, I guess I just wish that another trans person can be nominated pretty soon so that it's a better experience for everyone, especially at this time when everything is going really badly in this country for trans people because of the new administration. And it's, life isn't really great right now if you're trans. And this was a sort of bright spot that turned into a PR nightmare as well.
Michael, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for explaining everything to me.
Well, I tried. I don't know if I can explain Emilia Pérez or if anyone can.
Michael Schulman is a staff writer at The New Yorker. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Madeline Ducharme, Anna Phillips, and Ethan Oberman. Paige Osburn is our senior supervising producer. She is out for a bit because earlier this week she welcomed her own new team member, Ramin. That is Rami for short. Congrats, Paige, and welcome, Rami. Ben Richmond is the senior director for podcast operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down and say hi on Blue Sky. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you back here next time.